Rishi Sunak.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister also inherited inflation back at target, interest rates being cut, unemployment low, and indeed the fastest growing economy in the G7, Mr. Speaker. But that's not the point, because the Prime Minister now has to start taking responsibility for his own decisions. And if, as he says, the public finances are a priority, it was his decision, and his decision alone, to award a train driver on £65,000 a pay rise of almost £10,000. And it was also his decision that a pensioner living on just £13,000 will have their winter fuel allowance removed. So can the Prime Minister explain to Britain's low-income pensioners why he has taken money away from them whilst at the same time given more money to highly paid train drivers?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we spent the whole election with him trying to tell the country that everything was fine, and this is the result they got. A massive mandate on this side to change the country. And if he carries on pretending everything is fine for ordinary people across the country, they're going to be there for a very, very long time. And I remind him that we inherited absolute chaos from the party opposite. We lost an average of 3 million working days a year to strikes under his watch. And you cannot fix the economy if the trains don't work, and you can't fix the economy if the NHS isn't working. And when it comes to winter fuel payments, they're having a competition, as I understand. They're going to be voting later on today. Well, his shadow housing minister, we found this. She's the favourite, I think. Some of them will be probably voting for her this afternoon. She said, her words, "I have people in my constituency telling me they don't need winter fuel payments. Why do we not have a more sophisticated mechanism for mean testing?" That's their favourite, I think, in the contest that they are having.
Mr. Speaker, again, the Prime Minister talked about the public finances. The UK's public finances are more robust than almost that of any other major advanced economy. Here we have it. He inherited a lower deficit than France, America, Italy.
Order. When I do point you to be quiet, I do mean it. I don't need a reaction back like that. Rishi.
Well, the UK currently has a lower deficit than France, America, Italy and Japan. It has the second lowest debt in the entire G7. And he opposed every difficult decision that we took to deliver that. So I certainly am not going to take any lectures from him on that score. But he talked about protecting ordinary people. Well, last year, under the Conservative government, a low-income pensioner with just £13,000 received not only the winter fuel payment, but also hundreds of pounds of additional cost of living support, both of which he has now scrapped. Age UK have said cutting the winter fuel allowance is the wrong policy. And only this morning, we've learned that the vast majority of the poorest pensioners in poverty, are going to see that vital support removed. So can he tell the House, very specifically to the pensioners that are watching, how much less support a pensioner on £13,000 will receive this winter?
He talks about tough decisions. It's tough to inherit £22 billion black hole, which the OBR did not need. That is the inheritance. That's what they left. Now, back when they were in government, they'd have pretended it wasn't there. They'd have walked past it, put it in the long grass. We're not going to do that because we were elected to change this country for the better and stabilise our economy. No Prime Minister wants to do what we have to do in relation to the winter fuel allowance, but we have to take the tough decision to stabilise our economy to ensure that we can grow it for the future. And as I've said, we are working hard on pension credit. We're allowing housing benefits, which they didn't do for years, and over 5 years, it's a projected increase of up to £1,000 for those on pensions. We are tough decisions that they done.
Mrs. Sunak.
The government doesn't have to choose to take money off low-income pensioners in order to give it to highly paid train drivers. That is a choice that he has made, and it will be clear to any pensioners watching that he simply can't explain why he has made that choice. But, Mr. Speaker, turning to another important issue. The government has suspended 30 of the UK's 350 arms export licences to Israel. It's a decision that the Chief Rabbi says beggars belief and will encourage our shared enemies. Can the Prime Minister therefore explain how his decision will help to secure the release of the 101 hostages still being held by Hamas?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, can I start by saying I think the whole House will be shocked by the horrific killing of 6 hostages in the last few days. And I know I speak for the whole House when I say that. The remaining hostages must be released, and we need a ceasefire to ensure that that can happen, that aid desperately needed can get into the region, and we can begin the path to a two-state solution. Now, he asks how we arrived at this decision. He knows very well, because the legal framework is clear. The latest guidance was issued in 2021 under his government. And that means that licences have to be kept under review, as they were by his government. And I think he probably knows the advice that was given to his government. He understands the framework. We've carried out the review in the same way and come to a clear legal conclusion. And shared that conclusion, the assessment, with Parliament. We will, of course, continue to stand by Israel's right to self-defence. But it is important that we are a country committed to the international rule of law. That gives us the strength of argument with our allies on important issues. This is a difficult issue, I recognise that, but it's a legal decision, not a policy decision. Rule of law. That gives us the strength of argument with our allies on important issues. This is a difficult issue, I recognise that, but it's a legal decision, not a policy decision. And the Prime Minister knows the framework, and they issued the guidance, they know what the test is, that test has been assessed, we've come to a conclusion, and we've put that before the House to consider.
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the Prime Minister's answer, but he'll know that decisions like this also have important and broader geopolitical implications. And he mentioned allies. It's essential that we maintain transatlantic unity in the face of terrorist threats and avoid any perception of splits between our two nations. So can he therefore update the House or tell the House what engagement he had with the United States prior to taking this significant decision?
Prime Minister.
I acknowledge the importance of working with our allies on all issues, as we have been doing, as I was able to make very clear at the NATO summit that I attended in the early summer. And of course, as he would expect, as the House would expect, we have talked this through with our allies. They understand. They have a different legal system. That is the point they made. It chunters from the. This is a serious issue. It requires serious consideration. And the Prime Minister knows the legal framework. He knows the legal framework very well. He also knows that applying that framework, the facts of that framework, and arriving at a decision does not permit me to simply then say I'm not going to implement the legal decision and conclusion that's been reached. I don't think he's really inviting me to do that.
Mr. Speaker, on Monday the Prime Minister announced his retirement plans, and he said it was because he believed in giving straight answers to straight questions. Now, after 5 years of Prime Minister's questions, that was music to my ears, Mr. Speaker. So here's a straight question. Will he now rule out a rise in VAT?
In 43 days' time, I plan to arrange his retirement, Mr. Speaker. But he's right. He's right. Straight answers deserve straight questions, and the answer's yes.
Well, let me say to him, nobody is going to believe it. And